Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Erin Shoemate, and I'm the Deputy Director of Professional Development Programs here at Eno. We are excited and thrilled today about this webinar. We have Jamie Johnson, who's the Director of Strategic Initiatives at WMATA, and Alyssa McDade, who's the Senior Program Manager of the Strategic Initiatives at WMATA, here today to talk to us about the Office of Strategic Initiatives, and how they manage change and implement business transformation at the agency. Since its inception in 2017, the Office of Strategic Initiatives has really worked with the departments across the organization to improve WMATA's operations. So we will hear from them shortly. I do want to go over some logistics before we get started. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question box. You'll be able to see it on your control panel. We will do the questions at the end of the webinar, so throughout the entire time, feel free to write in any questions you have. So Jamie, who as I mentioned, is the Director of Strategic Initiatives. He's been the director since 2017, and he was a management consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton, as well as a police inspector for 10 years with London's Metropolitan Police. Alyssa is the Senior Program Manager and has been with WMATA since 2017. Prior to that, she worked as a community planner at the FTA, Federal Transit Administration, as the Director of Client Engagement for a small software firm, as well as a project management consultant in home entertainment and in regional government in California. So without further ado, I will turn it over to the two of them to talk about the Strategic Initiatives Office at WMATA.
Well, Karen and Aaron and everybody on the line today, thank you very much indeed for your time and your interest and this opportunity to take part in an Eno webinar. Alyssa and I are very excited to share our experiences and to field your questions and hopefully stimulate some different thinking and allowing us to share what we've learned over the past few years working together here at the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, which is quite a mouthful, so we'll be referring to ourselves as DC Metro. So really what we wanted to do first of all is to set the scene and just to give you a flavor of our organization at the higher level. There are around 12,000 employees across the organization. A significant number of those are obviously operational. We provide rail, bus, and paratransit for not just Washington, D.C., but also parts of Maryland and Virginia. Our board is interestingly comprised of 4 different entities, which makes which reflects the complexity of the service we're providing. We have the federal government as well as the city of DC and also the states of Maryland and Virginia. In 2018, on both the Metro Bus and Metro Rail, we provided 295 million trips, and we are the 3rd largest heavy rail transit system behind New York and Chicago, the United States, and the 6th largest bus network. And an interesting fact is the fact that we move 4 times more people each year than Baltimore Airport and the Reagan National Airport and the Dulles airports combined, which are the 3 main airports of our region. The last point I wanted to highlight is that 54% of the region's jobs are within half-a-mile radius of all metro stations and metro bus stops, which, as all people in the transit community recognize, we really see ourselves not only as providing transportation and connectivity to our riders, but really seeing ourselves as a generator of economic growth and stability and equality across the region. Our general manager is Paul Wiedefeld, and he has been in post now for since 2016, and he previously worked for the BWI airport, so he brings that experience. And Our immediate bosses, well, we've actually just moved, interestingly, and we'll talk a bit about that later within the organization, but our boss who's responsible for operations was Joe Leader, who formerly ran the subway up in New York City Transit. So he brings huge experience. And our organization is really turning around at this time. We had an unfortunate series of events which led the general manager to make the decision in 2016 to close the system for a number of days. And that really was rock bottom for us as an organization. And ever since then, we've been making strides to improve what we do and how we perform for our riders. So just to know who is speaking, we've been kindly introduced, and that's what we look like, so you can see us at the other end of the screen. We're going to split up the webinar today, and we're looking to get through this in about half an hour, so we've got time for questions. I want to give you a bit of history about our team because it's slightly different. It's certainly new to this organization, and I think it's relatively new across transit properties. Our philosophy, and then 3 areas that we really wanted to focus on when we're discussing today's topic, which is change and how to bring about change in organizations, and specifically transit organizations, and that's people, data, and action. So let's move swiftly forward with the first element of this, which is history. So strategic initiatives, as you heard from the introduction, we were founded in 2017, but Joe arrived in 2016, and he wanted to replicate a department that had the same name as us, but up in New York, and that was called Strategic Initiatives, and that was where a PhD and a former McKinsey consultant were brought together, and they were asked by the executive team up there to solve problems. And Joe saw this dynamic, this team, as absolutely essential if he was going to transform the way Metro does business, specifically in operations. Since then, we have gone through 2 iterations really of the team, and you'll see there that what we've really tried to do is bring as much diversity to our team as possible. And we're through now with the 2nd generation of project managers and analysts who really are simply change agents trying to drive change and find solutions to some of the more tricky problems. We select our work on 2 criteria. The first is the potential to substantially improve operations at a strategic level. And the way I define that is affecting multiple departments, not just one department. And secondly, we must have an internal partner, a senior manager who will commit to owning the solution if we prove it successful. We're a project implementation team which drives change, but we sadly are not an operational team. So we can't be delusional and create things that aren't going to be successful if not led by an operational department. And we'll come to that more later on in the presentation. So to give you an overview of our work, what you will notice from the outset is that we are not the team that is focusing on externally driven, rider-focused projects like fares or changes in our ridership policy. We are very much focused on the internal mechanisms, systems, and performance of different teams across the organization, which will in turn improve the performance for our riders. That's where Joe and now the broader executive team see us as bringing most value. So the first area on the far left is under the title, the first program that we're running is the 3% Challenge, and you'll hear a lot more about that later on, but this really is about being more efficient and managing our budgets better. And we're trying to improve the way we manage the non-revenue fleet alongside the department that own the fleet. We're working with bus transportation to ensure they have the resources to be more efficient. And we're also working with maintenance departments to optimize the way they do business. In all those examples, we are not leading the projects necessarily, we're supplying the tools to make departments successful. Then we'll come to track access a bit later on, but in summary, it's about getting the work done on the track. We're under huge pressure to regenerate our system and reach the state of good repair once again. And the track access program allows our crews to get out on the track to do that. Then there are two areas where obviously we work now in the Office of Strategy, Planning and Program Management, because the organization has seen the value our team can bring. And so now, having been in the Chief Operating Officer's department, we've moved across to take a more strategic position in the organization. And this pink column in the middle is some of our new work, which is building an organizational plan and also assisting various teams to work on their collective bargaining strategies, which is obviously vitally important to move the organization forward and bring the unions and work with the unions at every step. And then there are more foundational projects that we're looking at, how we deliver training, how we use business tech, all the way across to capital risks. We have a $1.5 billion capital program that each year that we have to deliver, that the jurisdictions have kindly given us those funds to recover from the situation I described earlier. And we're running projects that allow us to implement that capital program and not fall foul of inefficiency. On the right-hand side is safety. It's absolutely a priority for our general manager. Safety trumps everything else. And therefore, we are tasked with some very specific tasks in order to focus on specific problems that present themselves. An example here is bus operator assaults. It's a problem that everyone faces across the country and indeed the world, and protecting our bus operators is a real priority, and we're working hard to find solutions that actually work to reduce those numbers. So that's the overview. So the philosophy, I just wanted, before I hand over to Alyssa, to share with you how our team is different and therefore able to make an impact on the organization in a different way than departments have in the past. So what you'll see here is the team, and I see strategic initiatives as a pipeline of talent into DC Metro and also into transit more generally. We're a diverse group. We come with lots of different experiences, and controversial in some ways to some people is that I have actively, and you'll know from my background in the introduction, I am not from transit, I am from policing. That's where I've learned my trades of management and business acumen. We don't necessarily want people from transit. We want different perspectives, different experiences, and different ways of doing business. So this slide, when we put it together, I was really encouraged that I feel we're getting that right. And just by looking at this slide, you'll see all the different experience that my team, with Alyssa here. Alyssa, where are you on here?
I'm the Slow Cog, Federal Transit Administration, I think Sony Entertainment.
Yeah, so Alyssa actually somehow covers a lot of the slides. So, but that's good, that's good. So the downside of bringing this diverse experience together is sort of the coined millennial challenge, I suppose, is that people want to move on, and because their interests are broad, so that's the risk. And I'm proud to say that I haven't lost anyone to leaving the organization. In fact, what's happened is that people have taken promotion within the organization, which is exactly the strategy that we've employed. Alyssa and I have built a pipeline of talent that are coming in through our team, doing good work and delivering results, but then moving into the rest of the organization to share that best practice and share their skills and talents. So it's a pretty simple strategy, but I think it's absolutely critical to making this teamwork and improving the organization as a whole. So I want to hand over now to Alyssa to talk about our third point of 5, which is people.
Thank you, Jamie. This is a really important section because WMATA, or DC Metro, is a very people-centered organization, and we are really relationships driven. So this next slide is talking about how we as a new organization within DC Metro began to build relationships. As Jamie showed you, we joined Metro with a variety of different backgrounds, but within operations itself, we were relative outsiders. And we were very careful from the outset to build trust with operations employees, and do so with some humility, because we wanted them to know that we were here to work with them to solve the key problems they face on a daily basis that keeps them from doing the work that they need to do, the important work they need to do. We were not here to tell them what to do or to act like we knew what we knew their job better. So building relationships was a key way to do that, and that involved, yes, bringing coffee and donuts at a 5 a.m. meeting so that we could meet with the overnight shift as they were coming off of their shift. It involved us going out with crews overnight to see how work was done so we could understand their perspective. And we also learned very early on how important it was for us to partner with those very staff to develop solutions and drive results. So they could tell us what's wrong, but we're not going to walk away from them and say, great, thank you, we'll go fix it now. We want them to help us develop the solution and then drive the result. And without their knowledge and support, we knew we would never be able to get the project to take root or develop a lasting solution. Our Metro partners range from key partners who can double as our project sponsors, influencers who are managers and project leads willing to and able to partner to bring change to the organization, and doers who are the folks doing the work and often the most vital to gain buy-in on the value of the change we're trying to develop. So for that reason, it's also very important for us to have very, very direct and key simple tools to provide to our partners to make sure that we're held accountable for our actions. So one thing what we want to make sure we do is have regular communication through multiple tools, whether it be email, phone, video, and of course the best always is in person, and to develop projects that are based on clear evidence. Once we kick off our project cycle, we also use solid data to support the value of the project. We use simple tools such as Microsoft Office to communicate the scope, the benefit cost analysis, the business case, and the project plan for the project. We execute a communication plan that ensures our senior leaders are getting the regular flow of information to make decisions, to support the project, and to redirect the project where necessary. And once we've begun to execute the project, we use Microsoft BI to share status, metrics, and next steps in a transparent manner. Now I'm going to hand the mic back over to Jamie, and he's going to walk you through an example.
Yes, so we've got 3 major buckets that we're going to talk about today about change, and this first one, people. And we want to give you a real life example of each. So what we're talking about here is people. We can talk about people as much as we like, and the softer side of it is a skill in itself, building trust and relationships face to face. But what we have found as a group is that really what's missing in the organization in some areas is the systems and the tools to have those relationships and sustain them in a professional manner when life is racing by, there's pressures to get buses out, there's pressure to deliver the paratransit service. and people just haven't got the time or the structure to communicate. So we've had to use what we think are simple but valuable tools to allow that to happen in a formal way. The 3% challenge is the first case study we want to talk about very briefly. Last year in April, our jurisdictions signed into law the fact that if they're providing us with a significant uptick in capital funding, as I mentioned, 1.5 billion a year, they wanted some guarantee, quite rightly, understandably, that we were going to spend our operating dollars responsibly. So what was agreed by the general manager is that we would cap our operating subsidy growth at 3% a year, and it has been higher than that in the past. So in order to do that, we have to be very coordinated and very thoughtful about how we spend our money. One approach is for the chief financial officer to say, your next year's budget is this, it will reduce by this amount, X amount, and you have to respond accordingly. That is not the preferable way to do business. It is a way of doing business and can be very effective in managing a budget. But what we wanted to do is to allow operational departments to manage their budget on their own terms. And that means identifying, putting into place, and executing and tracking projects that are going to reduce the operating budget or increase revenue. So what we have done is very sort of standard program management approach. We've identified around 23 different projects, put them together into a program, given them the shine a light on the value that they bring, and also provide the project managers with the support and the top cover to actually execute. And everyone is going about their daily work and achieving great things, but we wanted to ensure and give them the support so that they're successful. And that really is the 3% challenge program in a nutshell. So we've collected 300 ideas across the organization and continue to do so. We've identified the reason why the number is slightly higher than I just said is because we've started to roll projects together, so we're more efficient in how we report and deliver. And then we've got about 10 really promising ideas that could save significant amounts of money. I'm talking $1 million plus, or generate equivalent revenue. And what I want to describe now is the tools that we're sort of holding this together, and it's bringing the people together and allowing us to communicate in an open and professional manner. The first is this operating budget impact tool. A project manager doesn't necessarily have the financial skills to, it's not really part of their job, to price and cost a project. So what we've done is we've brought the folks from the finance team, as well as those who manage the budgets on a daily basis, and importantly, the budget owners, along with the project managers, to come together and actually do a comprehensive analysis of what they do, and what they do currently, and what they spend currently, and what the impact of this project will be. It's been a cultural change in the way we think, the level of detail we're asking for, but we're sort of holding people's hands and taking them through the process and trying to take the weight off them in doing this. But what this does do is provide them with the political justification to follow through with their project. And it's really professional as well, and it's giving people confidence and pride to do as good a job as they can do. The next tool that we're using is the dashboard. It's very common nowadays, and it's ironic that we entitled the slide Transparent Dashboard, a program dashboard, and it's slightly grayed out. It's just because there are going to be some sensitive details on there that we would think it would be unfair to those leading the projects to share publicly. But this gives you the idea of the fact that you can see the savings in the bar chart over the out years that these projects are promising to deliver. And we have commitments from those project managers that they will deliver. And we are communicating. This is really a communication tool, allowing people to see what one another's doing, allow the executives to see what their staff are doing, and ultimately to move the organization forward as one. And this is not, hugely innovative. We're just bringing good practice, good basics, that allow people to do their jobs better. So that's another view of the dashboard here, and that's all the projects listed. So you've got one screenshot of all the projects and a summary of the impact they'll have, and then you've got the project level summary of a specific project within that greater program. And this is all done on Microsoft Power BI with a simple Excel data source. So drawing to a close the sort of third part of the webinar today, and that's about people. We continuously work with our key partners, influencers and doers, as Alyssa described, using techniques to drive accountability and communication. So we're not just soft-skilled people, we're trying to use hard skills to ensure the relationships are built and are sustained. And in doing so, bottom right here, we keep people informed, and ultimately, which establishes trust, which, as Alyssa started this section with, this is a relationship strong organization, and we have to adapt to that and support that, and it's one of our greatest strengths, and we're just bringing a different perspective to it. So I'll hand it back to Alyssa to talk about data.
Great, thank you, Jamie. So data is really important, and as we've talked about, we want to define. We're getting a lot of good input from our field and from our staff as we partner with them, but we want to make sure that we're defining the problem with concrete evidence. There's something to support it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to use solid data to validate the project value. Of course, we don't want to pursue projects that don't bring that value that Jamie communicated at the beginning. It's something that's going to transform the agency and is going to be across multiple departments. But this isn't always easy to do in an operational environment where your client and partner has 20 to 30 years of lived experience. And so it's very, as we talked about during the people section, it's very important that we wholeheartedly believe what people tell us. Yes, these are challenges that you experience on a daily basis. And then we have to communicate back to them, let's look and see if there's data available to help us, justify the ability to then take this onto the project level. So we go and we look for data, and then we may find that there's data everywhere. We may find that it's in a database. It may be something we have to collect, or it may be in a source that previously had been unused, and we may have to clean it and do some additional things, which we do with in the next step with our validation. So we're gonna take that data. We're gonna try to understand what's involved, what it's telling us, and then we're gonna walk back to our client and say, hey, does this make sense? And listen, I'm able to validate what you told me in this area, but this other thing that you talked about, it looks like it only happens like 1 to 2% of the time. It's important, and I know it's important to you, but I think we should focus on the areas where we see a large occurrence of that issue happening. So again, continuing to validate what they've told us, but then using where we see the greatest concentration of data to move forward with a problem solving and project implementation. So lastly, we know that data then has the power to transform known problems into something that's either a repeated problem to be solved or something that is more, as I said, anecdotal in nature that just needs to be watched, and maybe could also become something that we tackle on the cultural side of the house. I want to talk to you about that there's a list of projects that Jamie showed you under Track Access Program. And so I want to talk to you about how we've used data for this program to really begin understanding what the problem was and to start to tackle how we approach the problem. So as Jamie mentioned, we really need to cut operating costs, but deliver consistent service and schedule much of that $1.5 billion in capital projects on our rail right-of-way. The problem that we were faced with was Metro crews were falling behind on preventative maintenance and capital improvement because access to the right-of-way was tough to come by. So the task we were faced with was, hey, can you increase crew access to the track during non-revenue hours? So the non-revenue hours is after the train system closes for the customer in the evening until it opens again in the morning. That's called non-revenue hours. So we're not collecting revenue during that time. So just this is just an example. It's not the exact data, but this is just an example of what happens overnight on the track. So I just want to explain this to you so you could better understand my example. The overnight maintenance window looks like this on average, and these are the activities that occur during our non-revenue hours on the rail right-of-way. So passenger trains stop running. There are pre-work activities that occur. Things are being cleared off the tracks. Crews are getting to their location to go out on the tracks. Work may begin after 1, and then maybe we'll clear up at 3, and then there's post-work activities, clearing up, getting the right-of-way ready for revenue service. So this is just an example. It's not exact. But on average, our crews were only getting about 2 hours of work, or what we call wrench time, before they needed to clear up to let service begin, and we wanted to see how we can expand that. Let's talk about our data. So to perform, we're looking for data. As I mentioned before, we want to find data to validate what we hear from people. So we met with people to understand what their challenges were, and this was our 5 a.m. coffee and donuts kind of meeting. We want to understand what are the challenges you face. We wrote down a huge list of those challenges, and then we set about, then we set about validating those challenges with data. We looked for a data system that would help us do that. And we found that in our track rights, it's a home-built system called General Orders and Track Rights System, or GOTRS for short. And what we did, we realized that this GOTR system was used to record milestones for every crew every night, and no one had really comprehensively analyzed this data, or they had, but not in this way. So when we pulled the data, and we pulled it out of a Cognos system, and we downloaded it to Excel, and just began analyzing what we saw, trying to understand the different pieces of data, cleaning out anomalies where we needed to, and we very quickly began to see a really good picture of what happens overnight on the track. So that's that picture of whatever happens overnight on the track. So once we did that, we were then able to take that data and really start to understand and validate what we heard from people. So we're taking this untapped data set, and then we're saying, okay, we've heard these issues from you. Let's take this data set to understand what the value is of the issues that you've talked to us about. And we learned that there was a process, or a broken-ish process that was happening, where there were some workarounds being developed in absence of that process. And we were able to introduce this information to our monthly in our monthly performance review to senior leadership, to put eyes on the problem. So just to unpack that a little bit, back to the GOTRS data set, pulled that down, found out what the biggest problems were, went back to the people we talked to initially to gather those problems, our partners in the field, and said, these are the areas we found these were absolute issues. These other ones are smaller, and maybe we can address them later. But this one big issue, it seems like we're using track rights last minute pretty frequently. Can you tell us about that? And it turned out that sometimes that was being used as a workaround for long-term planning to get out on the right of way. So we said, well, what's the process or what are the requirements for using this workaround or for this last minute right? And we found out there weren't really solid written down requirements. We worked with that same community to develop those requirements, piloted something, and saw a major reduction in usage of those last minute rights. And then we were able to validate that to senior leadership through our monthly performance dashboard. So they saw that decrease. We used that we built on that to develop a longer, more comprehensive procedural document or a standard operating procedure that we were then able to use as a foundation for the rest of our track rights and track access projects. So when our team embedded the overnight cruise track access performance document with our senior leadership during the monthly performance overview, or RailStat, the project saw additional gains. We saw better use of track time. We were able to start to coin language around what was going on and really just consolidate that to say, hey, we've got a wrench window, or this is the period of time that you do work overnight. And then we were able to have sort of consistent kinds of conversations around what needed to happen overnight in the non-revenue hours. This is the wayside work report that we developed to start to illustrate and demonstrate what was going on overnight using that data set. And this drove those and still does drive these conversations on a monthly basis. And so it drives action for each of the people whose data are going into that dashboard and have work to do to better utilize their overnight wrench window. Next, we're going to talk about action. This is the fifth section, and I'm going to hand it back over to Jamie.
Great. Thanks, Alyssa. So we've covered two key areas for us: the people, the data, and now we're going to talk about action. And obviously, everything else is really irrelevant unless we secure change, and that is what we're defining as action in this case. So there are three things that we wanted to talk about. The first is the fact that you have to have a sponsor, and we've learned through good and less well organized on our end relationships with sponsors that you need someone at that top level to see something through and to see success. I mentioned it earlier, but empowering ownership, it's absolutely critical that we have someone, a receiver at the end, to implement the solution that we put together. And then lastly, change management is something that we feel that we're continually having to push and introduce and educate our colleagues on, and ourselves. We've just recently come back from a ProSci training, which is a really fantastic way to understand this change cycle and how we can change behaviors. And what I tend to describe this as is a hands on the shoulder approach. We're always there just behind our colleagues in operations and elsewhere in the organization who we're trying to support, and we're not just sort of pushing over a product or an idea for them to execute, we're helping them build capacity to execute. So what we wanted to talk about lastly is this project called Metrodocs. Metrodocs is an initiative which is just coming to the end of the pilot phase, and we're now looking to roll this out across the organization. And when we arrived at the organization, and like many others, we go to search for a critical business document, a procedure or a policy, and it's pretty hard to find it. Many other organizations have got this down pat, and their documents are arranged and controlled in a very systematic way, and that we haven't quite got there at Metro. So what we're doing is trying to create a single source of truth with software that we already own, and allowing every department in the organization to be a part of this and ensuring that they are, because the big fear for executives and everyone else is that you create something, 10% of people adopt it, and it's yet another partial solution on top of the other partial solutions. So what we've found is that, you know, the role of the sponsor has to be formalized. And in this project, I personally and other members of my team have realized that you have to do this properly. The Chief Operating Officer, Joe, we've spoken about him previously, he has got a lot on his plate, and he initially was our sponsor, and it was fantastic. But really, we realized that he had so many things on his plate. He may not be the right person to be the evangelist. That's what you need. You need someone who is totally in with 2 feet. Joe is a great supporter, but he's got other priorities. So we've had to, with his permission and blessing, we've had to go across the organization to find others who will be advocates at the very highest level. And now we believe that the Chief Financial Officer, along with the other members of the executive team, are supportive of this idea, and we have buy-in from the top downwards. I've mentioned it already, but ProSci is a great way to understand, if you're looking for a way for your teams to improve their comprehension and ability to implement change. ProSci is a good way of doing that. It's one of the best courses I've come across. And that's not a plug. I don't know anyone from ProSci. We're just customers. The second area is empowering ownership. So it's all very well to say, yeah, we'll get a receiver at the end, a business owner who's got the interest to deliver, but ultimately it's not a passive approach that we take, it's an active approach. So one thing is, you know, Alyssa's talked a lot about data, but do we have the right people in place at the other end in the business to manage the data and analyze the data? And sometimes the answer is no, because things have been done differently in previous in previous experiences. So we have to get the right skills in place, and that might mean training someone up or finding a position who can provide those skills. The second is showing by doing. So even though interest might be high, there aren't, because of the pressures of delivering on an everyday basis and making sure the escalators and the elevators work, there aren't many senior managers who have the time to take advantage of what we can provide to them. But if there are people, there are senior managers who want to, we really jump on them and work with them, because we find that if we can deliver with them, it's a great indicator of what else is possible, and it's a great way of demonstrating the potential of the ideas that we have. And the last is the golden needle in the haystack, which really is hard to find, but as we built our network and reputation, more of these people are coming out of the woodwork in the organization, which are people who are very, very progressive, very, very tech savvy, or business, have an MBA or business acumen, who can help us deliver. And they might be at the front line, they might be you know, in an office somewhere that we don't know about, and we have to open channels and ways of finding people who really are advocates and know exactly what we're talking about, whereas others may not. And that's exciting when you find those folks. And the third part of this action step is the fact that we need to put a comprehensive change management plan in place. We often hear about project management, we don't hear about change management. And that is providing the training. It's testing the solution before you deliver it. It's taking people from awareness through knowledge, giving them the skills to act, and then reinforcing that at the other end. And that takes various different formats and systems that we put in place, but we have to resource that accordingly. And Metrodocs is a great example where we have really put emphasis on change management. So adoption is high, interest is high before that, and awareness of the actual product or solution is high from executives down to the front line, and that takes time and resources. So in summary, we think that people are important for change. We have to focus on repeatable techniques to build trust. It's not just those soft skills. We know that the data's out there. It's just corralling it and then allowing it to speak and shining a light on the problem. And lastly, change management is the way to secure action, and it's something that's often neglected. It's something we really focus on. The last little tidbit we have before we open for questions is this is our project management methodology. We realize that WMATA, the DC Metro, is a sort of unique place to work in many ways, and this is after two years of trying things and not necessarily being as successful as we wanted to be. This is taking a design-centered approach to solving a problem. We've got the team together, and this is what we've come up with, and this is the approach that we follow, which is pretty standard for a project management approach, but it has special idiosyncrasies and specific changes and adaptations that we feel make that successful. Alyssa, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, we really tried to also take the sort of consultant language or the project management language out of our flow so that it was very easy to communicate and was translatable across all different types of knowledge base and skill sets. Really just wanted to be very clear, like in this phase we're scoping, then we're exploring a solution, and then we're going to test it. And so nothing too dramatic there. And really, it's not a big investment. We're going to try it out. We're going to try it out on a small scale before we venture into something that's more of a big expense. And then you can see yourself if it works. And if it works, great. Let's make it bigger, or let's continue it, and then let's hand it back off to you and make sure that you know how to use it and you can sustain the improvement.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure the technical fault was my fault. I'm sure of it. And it leaves us a bit of less time for questions, but obviously very happy to take any questions people might have.
Thank you, Jamie and Alyssa. There were a number of questions about the dashboard that you talked about. Can you talk to us a little bit how you developed it? Was it an internal development? Did you find software? And how would other transit agencies go about developing a similar tool?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, we can talk about. I think we could share this. So, just in terms of the technical parts of this, we at WMATA use Microsoft tools. All Microsoft tools. We have Office 365, and it is part of the Office 365 package if you have the full package. So it's something that you don't have to buy extra. We do have a number of staff augmentation consultants that have helped us develop dashboards, but we also have that skill in-house with our own team, and we're more and more of our team is learning how to do that. Microsoft also provides free courses for using Power BI to illustrate and show your data. And so in terms of talking about the 3% challenge dashboard, Jamie, how did you come about, like the different screens and what to show on each page?
Yeah, we really just had to sit down and think who our audience is and what do people want to see, what's the information people want to see. But the most important part of it is how do we make it easy to collect data and minister it, so we're not adding another burden to the project managers. There are solutions out there that are sort of cradle to grave, but we have to be realistic with the skills and the access that we have in the organization, because IT is obviously limited through security and money about what they can provide for us to use. So Power BI is what we've landed on, and usually that's with an Excel entrance point where that we collect the data. But yeah, it's at different levels, and importantly, the dashboards, like most dashboards, you have an executive level, generally speaking, the program level, and the project level with different levels of detail. You input the information once, of course. So yeah, I think that's a good sort of summary of the different aspects to a dashboard.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got time for about one more question. So one of the questions that a couple of folks were asking was, what is the biggest barrier to implementing positive changes that you all have faced at DC Metro?
I feel, for me, and I'm sure our answers will be different, or they may not be, it's the ability to, it's about prioritization. It's about prioritization. The executives and everyone below them are under huge pressure to bring about change. That may be driven politically, it may be driven financially, it may be driven personally, or it may be driven through a, policy, external policy requirement. But there's a huge list of things that need to get done. And the hardest thing is to negotiate and persuade the individual business owner who will own this to make it the priority. And if you're able to do that, things will move forward, and you have to continue to keep it up the list. And that is through executive briefings, through communications to the business owners, the budget holders, the budget office, so that they know that they have to authorize this money. That, for me, is where I sit anyway, is the hardest thing to overcome. Alyssa?
I would agree with Jamie wholeheartedly on that point, and I think it's a bandwidth issue sometimes too, and that sort of is just I'm sort of expanding out one of Jamie's points, which is you're working with the business owner, and of course our approach is to partner with the business to get things done, and to partner with the front line to get things done. But they have a limited bandwidth because they have a day job and they have so many other things to do, and we're not the only ones approaching them with solutions, or approaching them to partner to drive a solution. And so it is finding that bandwidth, and the way to do that, of course, is building that relationship and building that trust. And then what Jamie said, which is making sure that it's a value to that business owner and to the executive team.
And what it's not at Metro at the moment is an unwillingness or a disinterest in bringing change. When I think of our key partners, Dave, Laura, Mike, Leroy, they all want to change. They all are interested in what we can do for them. It's the prioritization and bandwidth that's the real challenge. But that's exciting. We have a leadership now who really do want to make change and see the opportunities that technology and systems and etc. can provide.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank both you, Jamie and Alyssa, for taking the time out of your day today, and for all the attendees for listening. Their contact information is listed on the slide, so I know we didn't get to a number of questions, so I'm sure that if you shoot them a quick email, they'll get back to you as they can. I do want to remind everyone that our next webinar is on December 12th, and it's on implementing MAAS in your region, what we know so far. So I hope that those who are attending this webinar will also be able to attend that one on December 12th. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.